y'all, today Otho Gold is going to tell you a tale about Tommy and the Tombstone tattoo. But I got to give you a context first of all. Now, there was this house back in Arkansas. It was pre-Civil War home. It was called the Hudson House, also known as Locust Cottage. It was this place about 13 miles south of Watson Chapel, which was right outside of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Now, what was unique about this home is that James A. Hudson had come from Tennessee back in 1844. And he built this house in 1855. But there was a house, there were barns, grist mills, there was a smokehouse, there was a post office, slave quarters, sawmills, gins. I mean, it was a self-functioning unit all through the Civil War. And there was a cemetery there. Now, the cemetery is what was really interesting to lots of people. Now, in 1961, there's a group of men in the community who got together and they decided they wanted to restore this beautiful old home and turn it into a youth camp. And what was amazing about it, when you went inside it, there were hand-hewn logs everywhere that had been hewn with, what do they call, flat axes. Yeah, flat axes by slaves. There were two staircases. One was a spiral staircase that went upstairs. The other one was a broader one down at the main entry hall. But 4 fireplaces, square nails that you could see everywhere. I mean, it was just an amazing old place. But because it was designed to be a youth camp, lots of people started coming out there. Boy Scouts used it, 4-H Club, and other groups. They would come out and just stay in the house, or they'd camp out on the grounds. But Otho's Boy Scout troop spent a lot of time down there, and we were really interested in that cemetery. Now, you can imagine back in the days when boys could just free range. You know, you could turn them loose on a property like that, and they'd run all day long, get into all kinds of mischief. Of course, they'd come back for meals, but the adults didn't have to worry about them like they do kids today. Well, anyway, that cemetery was just fascinating because it had some big monuments, and there was a Confederate gravestone, a big Maltese cross type gravestone. And it was just a place of wonder for little kids. Well, anyway, when it came night, there was all these stories that had been told about the Hudson House. There was a hanging tree out front. There were stories about buried Confederate gold. And so anyway, the idea that there were ghosts, you know, that was not a foreign kind of topic for little boys to think about. But the idea of tying someone up on a tombstone and leaving them out overnight somehow got into people's heads. And of course, you know, it's the bigger guys, the older boys, that want to initiate the younger boys by introducing them to the tombstones at the cemetery. Well, there's a little boy named Tommy. He was he was always getting into mischief. And the big boys, they decided that Tommy needed to be indoctrinated, and they were going to tie him up to a tombstone down in the graveyard at night. Leave him out there. And they did. A bunch of them, they got around Tommy, and he was fighting and carrying on, and they just tied him to that tombstone and walked away and left him. And throughout the night, they would come down and they'd be making sounds. Woo, woo. Of course, Tommy couldn't see them, but he heard these sounds, and the intent was to scare him. But all it did was make him mad. So he sat out there all night long, tied to that tombstone. And when those big boys came out the next day to untie him, woo, you'd think that they'd open up a hornet's nest. When they got those ropes off of him, he was just punching and flailing and flying around. He was ready to fight the whole Boy Scout troop. He was mad. Well, anyway, we learned a lesson from that because Tommy was mad the rest of the camping trip. And he never let us forget that. But, you know, that was back in the days when you do stupid things. You know, you indoctrinate kids, initiate them. But fraternity boys do that kind of stuff. You know, they call it hazing now. But we all grew up with that. People in my era, you know, you do stupid things. Well, anyway, Tommy was tied so tight to that tombstone that the markings on the stone were pressed into his skin. And when he took his shirt off, you could see the name of some fella, I don't know, David Grady, born 1802, died 1854, whatever. But he had that across his back. And, you know, the joke was that he had a tombstone tattoo. Well, that's my tale for the day. Don't do that anymore. That's just a bad thing to do to kids. You know, they don't ever forget that. Y'all be good.